Greetings, vinyl community, and welcome to VC Friday. In an essay aimed at record company marketing executives, Frank Zappa once described his ongoing output as the project object. And the idea was that his output was not meant to be perceived as a series of separate or discrete albums, and make note of that word discrete, but rather he was engaged in a single lifelong art statement. And what held the project object together was its conceptual continuity. Now, conceptual continuity was a fancy way of saying that key words, musical phrases, quotations from other artists or images all might recur at different points in the catalog. And that created a web of connection throughout Zappa's discography and other aspects of his career. And Zappa compared the conceptual continuity idea to Wagner's use of the leitmotif in his operas, where there might be a particular theme associated with each character that would appear in the orchestra every time that character appeared, or there might be a leitmotif attached to an inanimate object or a concept or emotion like a river or gold or valor or something like that. In 1974, Zappa released his 18th album, Apostrophe, which is not only rich in the aforesaid conceptual continuity, but also uses the term itself in the lyrics. And this is my actual original copy, purchased in 1974 when it first came out, probably at Tower Records. And it is on the Discreet label, which we'll talk a little about later. Apostrophe was the fastest selling album in Zappa's career, and the only one to make the Billboard Top 10, reaching number 10 on June 29, 1974. And Zappa was so delighted at this feat that he hired a marching band to parade in front of the Warner Brothers offices to celebrate his cracking the top 10. It remains possibly Zappa's most popular album, at least with the American market. It's one that's cited often as an entryway for, well, in particular, if you listen to other commentaries on this album, which are coming out currently for reasons that will become apparent, by commenters who are younger and less decrepit than I am, this will be the first Zappa album they ever heard. So it's a gateway album, and it's a relatively accessible album, so it's something that's hooked a lot of people. For me, it was just sort of in the middle, because I was already, a Zappa fanatic for years when it came out, and I don't rate it as one of the top Zappa albums myself. A lot of people do, particularly those who started with it. For me, it's somewhere, it's in the middle, but it's still great, because a middling Zappa album is unlike just about anything else. So it was the second release on Zappa's personal label, Discreet, set up with his then manager, Herb Cohen. And discreet's a funny word. This is, when I used the word discreet, meaning separate earlier, that's spelled with an E-T-E at the end, but the label is spelled with an E-E-T at the end. So on one level, it refers to the old jazz hipsters' slang word reet, which is a corruption of right, meaning good. And that's something that's already been alluded to in Zappa's canon on the Grand Wazoo album with the track Cletus, Auritus, Auritus. So discreet meant good discs. But Zappa also intended the label to specialize in quadraphonic sound, which was the big thing at the time, and Apostrophe was duly released in the Discreet quad format. And here is a quad copy. It's got the logo here, and you'll notice that it says Quadradisc. because when 4-channel sound first came out, or when it came to vinyl in the 70s, there were 2, or actually 3, competing formats used by different labels. 2 of them were forms of matrix quad, which used phase differentials to separate the front and rear speaker information, and this was an inherently lossy process. But the format that was used by the Warner Reprise associated labels, among others, was the superior discrete quad format, which required a special demodulator circuit in your playback system. And that's what the quadradisc logo signifies. It's the sort of brand name or strictly commercial name for the discrete quad format. Quadraphonic sound on vinyl died out after only a few years, but of course today we have assorted surround formats on digital media. And Universal has just issued a 50th anniversary box set version of Apostrophe, including both a recreation of Zappa's own 4-channel mix as well as a new Dolby Atmos mix, among many other goodies. And I don't have a copy of that to show you because Amazon lost my package. So as I'm recording this, I've canceled my Amazon order, which is lost somewhere, who knows where, probably some other person has made off with it, who knows. But I've reordered it, so it'll come. But anyway, that's the CD version with its associated Blu-ray content. But they haven't forgotten us vinyl hounds, because there is a new vinyl remaster of the original album on Gold Nugget vinyl, as well as a deluxe double LP on Yellow Snow Splatter vinyl with a glow-in-the-dark bonus single, no less. And that is what we're looking at today. Here we have the deluxe 2LP 50th anniversary release of Apostrophe, and it is on, as explained, Yellow Snow splattered vinyl with Frank glaring at you from the label. The second disc is similar. However, it's got a different image of Frank, which we'll talk about. Because, get in there, you. Because inside the gatefold of the LP is this alternate cover image of Frank, a sort of more benign-looking, softly lit Frank compared to the menacing image that they ultimately went with. This cover was not used at the time. You'll notice, however, that behind me I have an original slick from 1974, so it was produced, it was printed, I guess, as a test, but never actually put into production. And the book of the LP is right here, featuring an essay by the Vaultmeister himself, Joe Travers, as well as a very detailed essay by Simon Prentice. He talks in depth about each individual track to the point where I was wondering, what do I have left to talk about in my video? Because he hits all the marks. There's some things I disagree with on here. He makes some technical musical errors in his descriptions. And he does write in a very clever way that is amusing, but at the expense of clarity. He could be a little more straightforward in his text. So there's the friendly Frank and the menacing Frank. So, and instead of holding it up through the whole thing, I've got just a different copy to remind you what this is all about, because I'm sure I'll blather on so much that you'll forget. Disc 1 of the set is the original 9-song Apostrophe LP, of course, and that kicks off with the 4-part Don't Eat the Yellow Snow suite. That's a dream sequence. It recounts Frank's dream in which he is Nanook the Eskimo. And the first track is Don't Eat the Yellow Snow itself. It starts off with a funky, off-kilter groove in 7/4 time, occasionally punctuated by double-time drum interjections. And it's a relaxed and kind of comical sound world, but layered with an exquisite ear for detail. It's a prime example of Zappa's penchant for concealing his musical sophistication behind a veneer of utter silliness. The lyrics are a tour de force of rhyming, with every line rhyming with O. It's a trick he'll repeat later in the suite, so conceptual continuity strikes again. The opening line, "Dreamed I was an Eskimo," is followed by a flurry of notes that quote Lionel Hampton's jazz standard Midnight Sun, and it's a symbol of the frozen north. That, again, it's something that'll pop up again, both on the album and later in Zappa's discography. So that is conceptual continuity at work already. And Don't Eat the Yellow Snow segues directly into Nanook Rubs It, which is based on a swaying vamp in 6/8, and it's a spoken word piece this time, in which Nanook does battle with an evil fur trapper who has tried to take his pet seal. And the Midnight Sun theme appears again in a sleazy swing arrangement to illustrate the words "strictly commercial." So the beloved frozen north of Nanook is being sullied by commercialism. Nanook vanquishes the fur trapper by blinding him with snow that has been anointed by the local huskies. A DJ in Pittsburgh named Dennis Waters made a tape of Don't Eat the Yellow Snow and Nanook Rubs It, edited down to 3 minutes, and it became a popular airplay item. And when Zappa got wind of this, he created his own single edit of the 2 songs and released them as a 45 in October of 1974, so quite a few months after the original album was released. The single reached number 86 in November of 74. The original single from the album had been Cosmic Debris, backed with Uncle Remus. Here is a copy with a picture sleeve from Portugal of Cosmic Debris with Uncle Remus. So when Don't Eat the Yellow Snow became the item selected for airplay instead, this is the single that was released, and Cosmic Debris became the B-side. This is a promo edition of the same single with just mono and stereo versions of the Don't Eat the Yellow Snow edit. Here's a British release of the Don't Eat the Yellow Snow edit with Camarillo Brillo from the previous album, Overnight Sensation, on the B-side. And finally, here's the single that comes with the new 50th anniversary double LP. So we have Yellow Snow on the A side, we have Cosmic Debris on the flip, and the whole thing is on glow-in-the-dark splatter vinyl, sort of urine splatter vinyl. It doesn't have the snowy part, oddly enough. Did I say urine? I should have said husky wee-wee. So meanwhile, back on the album, we follow the fur trapper, who is now seeking a cure for his blindness. Unfortunately for him, he recalls the healing powers of the legendary margarine of the Church of St. Alfonso. And this breakthrough leads to song number 3, St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast, which is a crazed musical construction filled with riotous flurries of marimba and synthesizer notes and brass fanfares. And finally, over a funky dance rhythm, Zappa invites us to do the funky Alfonso, introducing the final part of the suite, Father Oblivion. Zappa based the title on an earlier composition which was called Farther Oblivion, but here with Joycean dream logic, it becomes the name of an Irish priest, Father Vivian Oblivion, who dreams of inappropriate activities with leprechauns while stirring the pancake batter. Like the first part of the suite, the last part is based on words that share a single rhyme, this time rhyming with frock. And one word in there is self-censored by Frank. He said it out loud on stage. He's such a madman. The whole thing ends with a distorted recollection of the Catholic Mass in Latin, which was still current in Zappa's youth and indeed in mine. And the dream dissipates with a chant of "Good morning, Your Highness," which comes from the Imperial Margarine commercial that inspired the whole pancake breakfast sequence. Side 1 concludes with the aforementioned Cosmic Debris, which is a down and dirty blues satirizing the guru industry, as Frank described it when I first saw him perform that song on stage in 1973 at that amazing concert at the San Diego Sports Arena. The song is a leftover from Overnight Sensation, the previous album, from those recording sessions at Ike Turner's Bollock Sound Studio, and has very much the sound of that album, with violin flourishes from Jean-Luc Ponty and major contributions from Tina Turner and the Ikettes doing backup vocals, somewhat to the consternation of Ike Turner, who owned the studio and kind of kept a tight rein on the female members of his entourage or his association. Frank plays razor-sharp guitar fills on Nanook Rubs It, but Cosmic Debris is the first song on the album to contain a full-fledged guitar solo, but there's plenty of that more to follow on side 2. Side 2 opens with Eccentrifugal Forts. It's a short musical whirlwind built over John Guerin's drum track from a jam in 1972. And when John Guerin received a copy of the album, he was puzzled because his name was in the credits, but he didn't remember playing the song. So Zappa explained, well, I isolated your drum track and wrote an entirely new composition on top of it. So that's what Eccentrifugal Forts is, and what an arrangement it is. It's full of squelchy synthesizer sounds from George Duke and Jean-Luc Ponty's sawing fiddle, and even a bouzouki played by Zappa himself. The lyrics are full of, again, Joycean puns and wordplay, and Frank gets in a spaced-out guitar solo, and the whole thing is over in a minute and a half. The title track comes next, Apostrophe, and that's the only instrumental on the album. It's a fire-breathing jam between Zappa and Jack Bruce, with Jim Gordon on drums and Tony Duran on rhythm guitar buried in the track. Jack Bruce's bass is at its loudest and nastiest, and he spends the whole jam jousting with Zappa for dominance. Zappa later grumbled that it was hard to play with Jack Bruce because he didn't seem interested in playing the bass as a support instrument. He wasn't just playing the roots of the chords, to which one can only reply, Frank, have you ever listened to Cream? Bruce, for his part, says that he was originally asked to play cello on the track, but the instrument they rented was unsuitable, so he ended up playing bass, except that unaccountably he also denied playing bass on the final record, but it's absolutely unmistakably him. The next track, Uncle Remus, is a George Duke composition. Again, we saw that on one of the singles as a B-side, with lyrics by Zappa. The basic track was recorded in 1972 as a demo for George Duke. They used the Grand Wazoo rhythm section of Ainsley Dunbar on drums, and Alex Mochowski, credited as Erroneous on the previous albums, on bass. And overdubs were added later, including backing vocals very prominently from the Ikettes again. And Zappa's lyrics are a plea for racial equality, and they walk a funny tightrope between sincerity and broad comedy. Zappa had a bit of a hard time being heartfelt, being sincere, so he had to add a little jokiness to take the vulnerability out of it all. And the album ends with the epic Stinkfoot. And as on Eccentrifugal Forts, Zappa has taken an older recording and stripped it down, taken off the lead parts, and sculpted a whole new composition over it. In this case, the track started out as a cover of the old Muddy Waters Blues, Rollin' Stone, which was something revealed only recently on the Funky Nothingness archival release, which I reviewed back when that came out. In the reworked track, Zappa discourses on imaginary diseases, again, a concept he talked about in that 1973 concert at the San Diego Sports Arena. He did a whole lecture about imaginary diseases, which has been released on a special album that's not available to the public, but was a reward for backers. It was a Kickstarter reward for backers of the Zappa movie by Alex Winter. So really, I plead to the Vaultmeister, to Amit, and to the gods of vinyl. San Diego, March 24, 1973. That concert's gotta be released. Where was I? Oh yes, Zappa discourses on imaginary diseases, on foot odor, and yes, on the function of the apostrophe itself, which we learn is the crux of the biscuit. He utters for the first time on record the actual words conceptual continuity while engaging in a Socratic kind of dialogue with his dog Fido, echoing the husky dogs on side one, so that in itself is an example of conceptual continuity. He creates a unique, slippery and disorienting sound for his guitar solo by taking separate signals from a standard magnetic pickup, which is placed across the sound hole of an acoustic guitar, and a contact microphone applied to the bridge, and then treating the two signals to different electronic effects. And the album closes with yet another dog-related callback, this time to the previous album, with the outro chorus of "The poodle bites, the poodle chews it," taken from the lyrics of "Dirty Love" from the Overnight Sensation album. So the second LP, the one that we might say is represented by this cover, it begins with 3 tracks previously released on CD on this 2016 release, The Crux of the Biscuit. This has a lot of previously unreleased material from the Apostrophe era. and it does use that alternate image for the cover. But the tracks that are repeated on this set are a skeletal take of Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, featuring just drums, a basic vamp on bass and piano, and Frank's vocal. And that's followed by a snippet that was edited out of Nanook Rubs It, in which Frank explains the mystery of the margarine, and reveals that the parish of St. Alfonso is located on the Columbia River Delta. And what's funny about that is that the Columbia River is actually notable for not having a delta. And then we get an alternate mix of eccentrifugal forts, which is really not very different from the released version. And what comes next is a full-length version of the Zappa-Bruce duel on Apostrophe. The multi-track tapes themselves, I guess Frank had made some edits in, so it's still not completely the original performance, but it's almost doubled in length from less than 6 minutes on the final Apostrophe released version to over 11 minutes on this new edit. And next comes a mix of Uncle Remus stripped down to just piano and vocals, including the backing vocals. So the Iket's vocals are very prominent here, plus there's a little tambourine, but the drum track is gone. And the side ends with a snippet of The Poodle Bites, the Poodle Chews It, as heard at the end of the album version of Stinkfoot. Only here it's somehow accompanied by strummed acoustic guitar. That's not something that's part of the rhythm bed or anywhere on the finished recording. So it's kind of a mystery how Frank put all that together. He was known for his practice of xenochrony, where he could take some tracks from one recording that, as in this case, he would have built up himself on multiple overdubs, and then layered part of that, just certain tracks, onto the multi-tracks of a completely different rhythm bed. So I think that's what happened here, that he used this strumming part to build up the Poodle Bites chant, and then he layered it onto the Rolling Stone rhythm bed, which formed the basis for Stinkfoot. And the fourth side consists mostly of live material from 1974, starting with an extended version of Cosmic Debris from Colorado Springs. It's part of one of two full concerts that appear on the CD box set. So Cosmic Debris was chosen to represent that aspect of the box. It's a much longer version than the studio version. It includes a harmonica solo by Jeff Simmons and a piano solo from George Duke. And on the studio track, Frank plays a guitar solo, but it's a very concise one. And on this one, he stretches out, although oddly, it starts off rather tentative. It's like he doesn't know is it time for my solo? But it catches fire soon enough, and he keeps it going and maintains the intensity for a few choruses. Next is a version of the composition Approximate from Basel, Switzerland, and that's an experimental composition where on the sheet music Frank wrote rhythms but without any note heads. So it's just like straight lines with no head on the note, meaning that the musicians had to play the rhythms precisely, and they're very naughty rhythms indeed, very distinctive, so it's easy to tell what the composition is, but they have to guess at the pitches. They just approximate where that line is. I'll play a pitch that is around there. And there's a guitar solo from Göteborg in Sweden called Göteborg guitar, or Göteborg guitar. I'm not sure how to pronounce that properly in Swedish. And the side ends with the soundtrack for a TV ad for the album. I think you get the actual video version of that on the box set. Another revelation from the Crux of the Biscuit CD is that Frank had previously assembled a tentative running order for a much earlier version of Apostrophe that would have Cosmic Debris as its opening track, and would also include a track called Down in the Dew, which has conceptual continuity with Uncle Remus, and is a really beautiful instrumental featuring his guitar very prominently, and was actually previously part of the same composition as the theme that became Apostrophe. So it's kind of unfortunate that Down in the Dew isn't included on this set, because it's a really wonderful piece, but it can be heard elsewhere. Now, I mentioned that there is also a single disc version of Apostrophe associated with these 50th anniversary releases, and it is on Gold Nugget vinyl. And I do not have that version or have it on order at this time. However, I can show you this copy from Newberry Comics from 2014. This edition is on a color-in-color version, and you might think of that as a sort of fried egg pattern, but no, it's also billed as yellow snow vinyl. You just can't trust those Huskies, can you? I did get to see Frank Zappa and the Mothers perform live in 1974, some months after Apostrophe was released, and they did perform a couple of tracks. They did Cosmic Debris again, which I had previously seen them do in 73. And they did the title track, Apostrophe, as sort of a closing encore number. And I remember, I think it was Napoleon Murphy Brock and Tom Fowler lying on their back on the stage while the riff was cycling and just kicking their legs up in the air while the riff went over and over. It was not as momentous a concert as the one in 1973. It was plagued by technical issues, and in fact, when the audience was allowed into the hall, somewhat late, I think we'd been kind of waiting out in the lobby. This was at the Golden Hall in San Diego, which is part of a complex called the Community Concourse, and there was a sort of waiting area, so we'd been in one set of doors but hadn't gotten into the actual seated area. And once we did, Frank and the Mothers were already there on stage, sound checking and trying to troubleshoot whatever the sound problems were. And Frank eventually gave up and said, well, let's just play some songs as long as we're up here. So he did a few songs and finally declared, well, that seems to be as good as it's going to get. So only then, I guess, was the concert officially started, because they brought on the opening act, who was Tom Waits. And this was on the eve of the release of his second album. He only had one album out. He was not yet well known at all. I knew who he was because I'd seen him on TV on a couple of local shows. And he was kind of a San Diego homeboy, but pretty much no one in the audience knew who he was. Even the journalist for the local paper who reviewed the concert didn't catch the name, so didn't know who he was watching perform. He was really, really good, but the audience hated him. I think, having already gotten a taste of the headliner, that did not set things up well. That was not a good situation for Tom Waits to be in. And my enduring memory of the audience during Tom Waits' set was the guy somewhere up in the mezzanine where I was yelling, "Somebody shoot that fucker!" So once Frank and the Mothers got back on stage, and the band consisted at this time of Frank on guitar and vocals, of course, Napoleon Murphy Brock on sax and flute and vocals, George Duke on keyboard and vocals, the wonderful, wonderful Ruth Underwood on percussion, Chester Thompson on drums, and Tom Fowler on bass. So it was a six-piece, definitely cut down from the much larger band that had played the previous year. When the band came back out, Frank invited Tom Waits to come and join them, and he told a story, the old 12-inch pianist joke, while the band played his song, Old 55, in the background. So there was also a rare performance of Mudshark at this concert. Frank honored somebody's shouted request for it. Do you really want to hear that? It's not really a song, it's just something we made up. So the band made a valiant effort at just sort of busking an unrehearsed performance of Mudshark. And so that's Frank Zappa in 1974 and the new 50th anniversary release of Apostrophe. And someday my box will come, and I'll hear the rest of what the Vaultmeister has trolled up from the vault. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Be well. I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now. La